This is going to blow your mind. It's 2008, a year that will be etched in history. The air crackles with uncertainty as fear grips the nation. The economy teeters on a precipice, threatening to plunge into the abyss. Families across America watch their savings evaporate, their dreams slipping away. Their homes slip through their fingers as foreclosure signs become a common sight. The American dream morphs into a nightmare, a cruel twist of fate. But how did we get here? What led us to this point of no return? This isn't a story about individual failures, but a systemic collapse. It's about a system rigged against us, where the odds were never in our favor. This is about Wall Street's casino, where recklessness reigned supreme and we were forced to play. We were told the economy was strong, a facade of stability. Housing prices would keep rising, they said, an endless upward trajectory. Subprime mortgages, we were assured, were safe, a promise that would soon unravel. But behind the glossy brochures and optimistic forecasts, a storm brewed, unseen and unstoppable. Wall Street, the supposed engine of American prosperity, had morphed into a ticking time bomb ready to explode. This is the story of how their greed, their hubris, brought the world to its knees, a cautionary tale for generations to come. Let's meet the usual suspects: Lehman Brothers, Bear Stearns, Goldman Sachs. These weren't just banks, they were empires. They wrote the rules of the financial system. These institutions peddled complex financial instruments. They were designed to be opaque, confusing. They assured investors these were safe bets. But these titans knew the truth. These weren't investments, they were wagers. They were bets on the backs of homeowners, many of whom didn't fully grasp the terms of their mortgages. And when those bets went sour, well, that's when the real trouble began. This wasn't just about numbers on a balance sheet, this was about people, families, lives upended by the reckless pursuit of profit. Now let's talk about those complex financial instruments. In simpler terms, imagine taking a bunch of mortgages and throwing them into a blender. Some were good, some were bad, but they were all mixed together. This concoction was then sliced and diced, repackaged and sold as mortgage-backed securities. Sounds complicated? That's because it was. These securities were supposed to be low risk, high reward. Wall Street claimed they had it all figured out. They had sophisticated models, they said, to assess risk. But here's the catch. They bundled subprime mortgages, loans given to borrowers with poor credit, into these securities. They hid the risk, disguised it as a safe investment. They sold it to unsuspecting investors worldwide. Here's where it gets really shady. Wall Street wasn't just selling these risky securities, they were betting against them. They created a whole new market, a casino of risk, called credit default swaps. These swaps were essentially insurance policies on these mortgage-backed securities. If the securities went belly up, the insurance would pay out. Wall Street knew these securities were toxic. They knew the housing bubble was about to burst, so they bet against their own products. They sold insurance on a burning house, knowing they'd collect the payout when it went up in flames. This wasn't capitalism. This was a rigged game. Section 5. Collapse, the fall of giants. Remember those big names, those titans of Wall Street? The ground began to crumble beneath their feet. The housing bubble burst, mortgages defaulted at staggering rates. Those safe investments, the mortgage-backed securities, imploded. Lehman Brothers, a 158-year-old institution, filed for bankruptcy. It was the largest bankruptcy filing in US history. Bear Stearns, another giant, teetered on the brink. Panic gripped the financial markets. The dominoes were falling and the consequences were devastating. Millions lost their jobs. Families were evicted from their homes. The American dream was on life support. Section 6. Saving Wall Street, a taxpayer-funded rescue. As the financial system spiraled out of control, the government had no choice but to step in. With a massive $700 billion bailout package, they rescued the very institutions that had caused the crisis in the first place. This wasn't just a bailout of Wall Street, it was a bailout of the entire financial system they had manipulated for years. The same banks that gambled recklessly with our money, that peddled toxic assets, were now deemed too big to fail by the government. The irony of the situation was both cruel and biting, leaving a bitter taste in the mouths of many. The people who suffered the most, the ones who lost their homes, their jobs, their savings, were the ones footing the bill for Wall Street's reckless behavior. The same people who were told to pull themselves up by their bootstraps were now, ironically, funding the golden parachutes of Wall Street executives who walked away unscathed. Section 7, Global Contagion, a Crisis Without Borders. The crisis wasn't confined to American shores. It went global, spreading like wildfire across continents. The interconnectedness of the financial system meant that when Wall Street sneezed, the world caught a cold. Markets everywhere felt the tremors. European banks, heavily invested in those toxic American securities, faced their own crises. They were not immune to the fallout. The global economy plunged into the worst recession since the Great Depression. Businesses shuttered and unemployment soared. The 2008 financial crisis wasn't just about numbers and balance sheets, it was about people. It was about trust. Families lost homes and communities were torn apart. Trust in the system, trust in the institutions that were supposed to protect us, that trust was shattered. People took to the streets in protest. The scars of the crisis are still visible today, a stark reminder of the devastating consequences of unchecked greed and a system rigged in favor of the powerful. The lessons learned remain crucial for our future. Section 8. Echoes of 2008, Lessons Learned and the Path Forward. We can't afford to forget the lessons of 2008. This wasn't just a market correction, it was a systemic failure. A failure of regulation, a failure of oversight, and a failure of accountability. Have we learned from our mistakes? Have we done enough to prevent another crisis? The fight for a fairer, more just financial system continues. We need stronger regulations, greater transparency and accountability. For those who gamble with our economy, the question is, are we willing to demand it? The answer, my friends, is up to us.